So I look at those three things. I say, God, what can I be the best in the world at? I'm embarrassing my girlfriend because I have this dream of like changing people's lives, and I start recording videos before it was cool.
And that's so interesting because comparison is I want to be like that person, but I was designed not to be that person. I was designed to be my own. Welcome to the Gratitude Podcast, where we connect you with tangible tools and professionals on how to champion your mental health, live a joyful life, and be happy now. Cody, welcome to the podcast.
Honored to be here, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Cody is a thought leader in so many different spaces. You really help to see things in people that they don't always see in themselves, but you also have such an amazing ability to not only pull the gold out of other people, but give them a tangible path on how they can share that gold with other people. So I really wanted to start with honoring you there.
Thank you, man. I received that.
Amazing. So one of the things that I've seen in life is that we're all dealt a different hand. And sometimes we can compare ourselves to other people, like they have this great life or they're in this place, but we don't always know where people started or even their stories. And so, Cody, I'd love for you to, before getting into where you are today, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about where you've been, where you come from, just to set some of the atmosphere and tone for just the amazing courage and man that you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say my story is definitely a message and something that I live now. So I'll take you guys back. You know, when I was born 3 months old, my father, Craig, went to prison. And he's still in prison today. See, my dad was a biker gang leader and wasn't the best guy, wasn't making the best decisions with his life. And because of that, I was born to a single mom. 2 years later, my sister was born from a different dad. And they just grew up a really tough life. You know, I remember growing up as a kid, drugs, alcohol, physical, mental abuse. You know, being evicted from our home 3 times, living in a car twice. It was definitely a rough start in life. And I do want to take a moment to say that, like, my mom was an amazing mom. I think you can hear those stories and think like, oh, his mom was a terrible mom. She did the best with what she had and what she knew. And my mom always loved me. You know, the men that she brought around weren't always the greatest men. So I just wanted to say that, Mom, I love you. But, you know, I just have this specific time I remember as a kid where I was probably like 7 years old. And I remember going to this little Mobile One gas station. My sister's like 5. And I remember my mom, we were poor. And my mom would complain to me as a young man sitting in the passenger seat of the vehicle, like, I can't pay our rent. And she was so distressed from that. And my little sister, see, they strategically place the candy bars in gas stations. I've figured this out now at the eye level of the kids so that they want the candy bar. And we're very poor at this time. We're probably about to get evicted again from our home. And my little sister sees the Butterfingers, her favorite candy bar. And she's like, you know, Mommy, can I have a Butterfinger? And I remember the look on my mom's face of hesitation to buy a 87-cent candy bar. And I remember like just seeing that as a young man, and it went to my core. It got to me. And she somehow probably maxed out a credit card, overdid it. She's like, sure. And she looks at me and she's like, do you want something too? And I'm like, no, Mom, I know we can't afford it. So that was my childhood. And at 13 years old, I don't know if like entrepreneurship is something that like you're born with or something that's developed or a combination of both. But what I knew was we didn't have money and I wanted to help my mom. So I started my own business. And I remember telling my mom that summer, like, hey, Mom, I'm going to start my own business. And she's like, what do you mean you're going to start your own business? And I'm like, well, we live on a small country road. I'm going to knock on our neighbors' doors and I'm going to offer to do yard work. You know, simple business, mow their grass, pressure wash their deck, rake up leaves, weed their garden. And she's like, fine, just stay on our road. And the next day I got out and I started knocking doors. And my neighbor, his name was Wally. And I'll never forget, knock, knock, knock. Wally opens the door and, you know, neighbors notice their neighbors. And I think he knew that, you know, I was a small broken kid that was insecure at a young age, that didn't have a father. You know, my mom was doing her best to provide for us. I'm like, hey, Wally, I'd love to do some work for you, trying to make some extra money this summer, starting my own business. And I'd like to believe he saw something in me. And he's like, sure, come over tomorrow and I'll find something for you to do. My first client.
There we go.
And I went over the next day. I'll never forget. I was so excited, Daniel. I dropped my backpack. I ran next door. I knocked on Wally's door like, oh, I'm ready. And it was a glorious moment because I grew up so poor, we only had a push mower. I never rode a riding mower. And in the Midwest, it's a big deal as a young man when you learn how to like ride the riding mower. Now in San Diego, we don't have many yards out here, but in the Midwest, you have big yards, country, lots of space. And I'll never forget it, like him showing me how to ride that mower. It was such a fond memory. I didn't have a dad. And so much so when I got done, he's like, hey, I want to talk to you. And I was making $5 an hour. He was about to pay me, and he slides me a Sprite. It's like the most vivid memory in my mind, like that Sprite sliding across that table on his back deck overlooking his pool. He had a nice home, a lot different than my home. And he's just like, hey, tell me about yourself. What do you like doing? What are you good at? What do you want to be when you grow up? What are you passionate about? He began to speak to me like I actually mattered. No adult had ever spoken to me and actually listened like my words even mattered up until that point. So much so that I enjoyed being around him. And I would go there every day after school that I could, that he would let me and my mom would let me. And I began to develop a relationship with Wally. I worked for Wally. He owned a couple companies. He began to teach me. He became like the father I never had. And, we listened to Tony Robbins tapes, Earl Nightingale tapes. He exposed me to things that were way beyond the culture that I was living in. It started to change my mindset.
And this is at 13 to 15 years old?
Yeah, 13 to 16.
Wow, that you were listening to that. That's amazing.
The OGs, bro.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy because I ended up moving in with him. And for some people, that seems very odd. I moved in with my neighbor. My mom has always had good discernment, though, and I believe it's a God alignment, right? That like how this door opened, and my mom understood that the environment I was being exposed to was best for me. But when before we moved in, before that full process happened, Wally sat me down, and we had one of the most difficult conversations of my entire life. See, I had noticed up until that point, he was kind of ill. He would cough a lot. Walking up staircases, he would take a break. And I guess as a young kid, it kind of went over my head. I didn't think too deep into it. But Wally, he sat me down and he said, listen, 9 days before you knocked on my door, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma cancer. I've had emphysema for about 3 years now. And I was told I probably have about 12, 13 months to live. And he was dying of cancer. And multiple myeloma eats away at the bone marrow in your bones. It makes them brittle. Your body begins to break down on itself. And you fast forward to this point, we're months past his quote-unquote expiration date. And I think about it now, and it's like the last few months he would look at me and say, the only reason I'm still alive is because you've given me a reason to live.
I was actually going to ask, because you see that when you give somebody meaning and that like, okay, you gave him the opportunity, right? This is someone who's been super influential in your life, but also understand that by you receiving that you were able to give him purpose to end for the lighter part of his life to kind of essentially have a legacy.
Yeah. He gave me a reason to live, though. That's the thing that I realize now. So I move in with Wally, and he lives till I'm 16 years old, and he changes my life forever. And I do believe that that's God. I do believe that God created a divine alignment. I believe that a man was dying that lost his purpose, that didn't have anyone, and there was a kid that never had a dad that needed a mentor. And somehow, by the grace of God, and that day that I knocked on his door, our paths aligned. And it changed my life, and it changed his life, because he lived 3 years.
Wow.
He was not supposed to live longer than a year, according to doctors. And when he passed away, and it's so important, I like to share this because people see me now, Daniel, and they don't understand like where I come from and why I'm so passionate and why I want to serve, because that man didn't have to do that for me. And I remember going back to the broken home, back to the old environment after being exposed. And they say once the mind is expanded, it can never go back. It's like learning things and seeing the world different, but walking back into the old world you used to live in and just knowing it's not aligned anymore. So I moved out on my own, and I've been on my own since I was 16 years old.
Wow.
I'm 28. I'm about to be 29. Almost 13 years I've been figuring this stuff out on my own. But I don't always tell this. I'm going to go deep today for your podcast. Between his house and my house was this like tree fort. And I went up in there and I cried my eyes out. Like, I've never cried before. I don't think I've ever cried as much as I cried on that day. I just lost the man that was like a dad to me. And I remember getting this like download from God that I was going to become for other people what he was for me. I was 16 years old. I didn't even know what that meant, but I heard it. And I began to pursue that. You know, my first exposure outside of what Wally taught me was I went to someone's living room. They were pitching an MLM and a network marketing company, and I jumped all in because it was the first time in my life outside of him that I saw other people wanting to chase their dreams, wanting to do something with their life. And God just began to present doorways to me, and I went all into network marketing with that company, and I built a big team, and I recruited over 600 people, and I began to learn about public speaking and personal development, and I actually learned there I was good at it. I was so scared to speak in front of people, and then I was like, oh, wow, like God gave me this gift. So then I started going into different sales jobs, and I'll never forget going to Columbus, Ohio. I think it was Columbus. And Eric Thomas, Gary Vaynerchuk, Darren Hardy, all these speakers are speaking. It was the first time I ever seen a motivational speaker live.
Wow.
Changed my life. I had seen tapes and videos and YouTubes and all that stuff. I used to get Darren Hardy's magazine. I used to get his CDs and listen to all the interviews he would do and like study people that were successful. But I remember when these guys came out on stage, I had this feeling I'm like in the nosebleed, second to last row, like still insecure, still trying to figure myself out, and seeing this guy on the stage and being like, that's what I'm called to do. And not because of clout, not because of fame, not because of pride, not because of ego, not because of applause, but because that one man was impacting all 2,000 of our lives with the words that he was speaking. And I began to tell people I'm going to be a motivational speaker when I grow up. And at time, I'm about to finish high school. I'm dating this girl. I won't drop her name. And I'm embarrassing her. I'm embarrassing my girlfriend because I have this dream of like changing people's lives, and I start recording videos before it was cool. This was like 10 years ago. Wasn't as popular as it is now. TikTok, none of that existed. My friends, like I was still hanging around the party crowd a little, and everyone just made fun of me and no one believed in me. But I knew that was a call in my life, and I kept making those videos and I kept figuring it out. And you fast forward through that, I didn't get millions of views. I didn't get millions of followers, but I got a few 10,000 people that bought into Cody. And I began to speak my truth, and it began to change their life. And through that, I developed a personal brand. I started learning about business more and entrepreneurship. And that personal brand and being around guys like you, getting exposed to the environments, proximity is power. And when you get around people that have done it and figured it out and they're making money and they're changing people's lives, you catch on. It rubs off on you. There's an old saying. If you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later, you're going to get a haircut. And I hung around the barbershop and I just never left. And sooner or later, I got my haircut and I launched a company and I made some good money and I changed some people's lives. And then you fast forward to Content Daily, it just fell in my lap. If I'm being honest, I never wanted to be a marketer. I never wanted to do what I'm doing today. I just followed the journey of doors God opened for me. And because I made videos, built a personal brand, other people gravitate to you when you have fruit in your life, and they ask you and they want wisdom from you. And I want to ask you a question. I know you're the interviewer, but do you know why a business exists? Like, just there's no right or wrong answer.
Well, one of the quotes or things that I think about is people don't buy ideas, they buy solutions to problems. So I think of business as a solution to a problem. And even some of this guy, Bob Dalton, correcting me, I used to say, don't ask people what they want to be when they grow up. Ask them what problem they want to solve. And he said it's actually one step further. He said, what solution do you want to provide?
Yeah.
So that would be my answer.
That's so good. A business, in simple words, it exists to solve a problem. And I had that aha moment because I had been like making content and like running this coaching program and like serving people and building masterminds. But then I just had a moment of like, wow, the one thing I love about what I do is when I meet somebody, I see the gifts God put in them. Like Daniel, from the moment I met you at Awaken Church, like I could see the identity that God instilled in you. And I have a belief system. There will never be another you. There will never be another me. There'll never be another you helping us. We have gifts, talents, ideas, dreams, passions that God put in us. But yet so few of us cultivate that, dig out the gold and give it away to the world and live a fulfilling life. So the real reason I loved doing what I was doing is because I was pulling that out of people and helping them believe in themselves and the call that God had on their life. Then that download hit. And I'm like, oh my God, I can help give the microphone to people to amplify the call God has on their life. And I got this download, and you know how you get like a business idea and you start just writing all the notes and the whiteboards and the sticky notes, and it looks like a mad scientist house. Yeah. I locked myself in my room for weeks, and I just cultivated this business plan that I was going to set out and help people build brands around them. But not just anybody, like people that like their heart was in the right place. They were in alignment with God. They wanted to make the world a better place. And you fast forward to today and the company's grown a lot. We've at least doubled the company every year that I've had it.
Wow.
In terms of client acquisition and revenue. And now I just want to help give the microphone to the right people.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think a number of those dynamics that you went into are amazing. You talked about proximity, right? So there was in high school, you had people speaking things over you when you had an idea or a vision, and they'd make fun of you, right?
Yeah.
Then now when you speak out ideas in the environments that you're in, people are reacting or responding differently, correct?
100%.
And I think what's so important there is if you have a dream or a vision that's on your heart, that dream, if it continues to come back, is a God dream, is a dream that is something that you're supposed to go and serve the world with. And even if somebody says like, hey, what are you doing giving motivational videos or doing that? Just go and do it. Take a step because of the ability and learning. Maybe you're not serving in the same exact motivational way that you were with those initial videos, but guess what you did? You were able to work that muscle out. You were able to take that action. You were able to overcome what other people think so that you can then share those things with the world.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's amazing too, like, God gives us these dreams, right? And you said something so key, like the dream that keeps coming back, is from God. But then there's like a co-creating and a partnership that comes in with God, right? Like God gives you the dream, he gives you the gifts, he gives you the ability, but he doesn't build the dream for you. He might present the doorway, the idea, the download, but you still got to open the door, walk through and co-create with God in that. And I would just love to see more people doing that, aligning with God and what he's gave them and co-creating with their gifts, their talents, their ideas, their dreams, and their passions. And if we can even inspire one person to do that with this podcast episode, that's winning.
That's amazing. And so one of the things I love is tangible. And that word co-create, I think, is one of the most powerful words that you can say. So what you said at earlier in the podcast is that you believe everybody, and I share this belief, that we're all made with a divine fingerprint, and it even shows that in our fingerprints there is no two that are the same.
Yeah.
So we all have certain gifts, so talents, things that we're born with, and then we have skills and things that we build and choose to learn. Yeah. And then we have experiences, like the experiences of your life. That's why I say cards you're dealt. But guess what you chose to do? You chose to learn through that. You had Wally, a mentor. You had a tough upbringing. You have something that can connect with people and be, well, if Cody can go from having a father in prison at 3 months to creating an amazing company that's building content and marketing for people and coaching, then maybe I can do it too. Yeah. So you inspire people with that. And so one of the dynamics of that is that we're all created in a divine image, but then you talked about co-create. So if you're talking to a client, you're talking to somebody, to get back to the tangible, how do you help to them to facilitate that co-creation? Are there questions that you ask? Because maybe I don't know the gold that's in me.
Yeah, no, that's really good, Daniel. I'd say there's a couple aspects to this. For one of the things that I always encourage people, we have to get clarity. You can't do anything in this world great unless you have clarity on what that is. And sometimes I meet people that have that figured out, right? Like they know the lane they're in, they know the call they have, they know the gifts. They just need to amplify it more. I'm going to get there. Before that, though, some people don't even have that figured out, and that's the hardest thing. And what I learned from a mentor was I had 2 questions that I can leave you on that are tactical and tangible that they can do. God, who am I? And God, why am I here? And I went for several months meditating on those 2 things and in prayer with God, and I partnered with him. And I said, God, who am I? Like, who is Cody Cottle and why am I here? And I through prayer and meditation began to get clarity on where God wanted to position me in my life and how he wanted to use me and what my identity was. So I would say the first thing is that. The second thing is understanding that just because God gave you an identity and gifts doesn't mean that anything's going to happen if you don't partner with him in co-creating that. So when it comes to marketing, like, people buy people long before they buy our products and services. When someone does business with you, I would believe, and I know you have gratitude in a brand and clothing and things like that, and it's a little different, but any service-based business, people buy people. We do business with people we know, people we like, people we trust, people we've bought into. I'm not going to go give my money or my business to someone that I don't like, that I don't trust is going to steward that and do what's in my best interest. So when I work with people, I help them understand, for one, figure out who you are. Second, understand people buy people, not our products and services. And social media, this right here is the greatest opportunity in the history of mankind to reach and connect with human beings. And most people are using it the wrong way. So we have this tool, we have these supercomputers, these super social platforms connecting every human being on earth that has access to internet, yet so few people are using it the right way. And to me, it's a microphone to amplify the message you have to speak, the gifts that you have, the services that you've created, the products that you've created, the businesses that you've created. So I'd say figure out who you are, what are your gifts, what are your talents, what are your ideas, what are your dreams, then figure out the vehicle that you're going to channel those into. Because a business is nothing more than a vehicle of talent that we partner into that vehicle, then we co-create with God because we can't do it alone. He gave us the gifts, and then we give it away to the world. But this is a tool and a resource. What you're doing right now, you're impacting more people's lives. I truly believe more people need to be like you, more people need to be like me, and have the courage and the boldness to be authentic, that word came up earlier, and to share what God's put on their heart. And I believe collectively, iron sharpens iron.
Right. Wow, that's powerful. And I think part of the dynamic, and I'll even speak for myself, is people have told me I love to learn and I love to ask questions and go deep in conversation like this, but I share this as an encouragement to other people. It probably took me 2 to 3 years of people saying, you should start a podcast, you need to do this, before actually going and doing it. And I also was given Corbin's behind the camera, an amazing part of the team, but like, he was brought into my life with a specific gifting for that so that we could make an impact there. But it actually took some time, and sometimes it was the people speaking over to be able to do that. But I think that's so powerful that each and every one of us have that. And as you were talking, I was thinking about something. If you think about a business and there's 500 people, you're like, wow, that's a really big business, right?
Yeah.
You think of how many Instagram followers and you have 500 followers, you're like, wow, that person doesn't really have that many followers. But if you think about that, or Facebook followers or TikTok or whatever it is, influencing 500 people is a massive amount of people. And I think that question and even the comment that you said earlier is one that I always encourage people to say. If it helps one person, share it. And I didn't realize it actually took me to doing the 29-0-29 challenge, Jesse Itzler's event, where I started listening to podcasts and I was like, okay, well, I need to prove to myself that I'm worthy, that I was building up my self-esteem and my self-confidence in something other than business and sales. So I was like, I need to go do something hard. I was also listening to David Goggins. And so through doing that, through posting those things, I inspired other people. And I realized exactly what you said. I said, this doesn't just need to be pictures of me partying downtown or going on boats or essentially living this life. So because I thought that would bring me happiness, I could actually impact people through that. And I think it's so powerful there. And I want to get back to also something that I believe we have in common. So you lost your mentor at 16 years old and you were crying and you made a decision at that time that you were going to have that same influence on other people.
Yeah.
So when my dad died, I remember it like it was yesterday. My mom had called me, and for those of you who don't know, I've shared this, but my dad died after his third bout with depression by suicide. And so my mom calls me and she gives me the news. It was my last day of finals. I was at my friend's house. We were just cooking breakfast. My mom calls twice. I ignore it because I'm in college. And then my sister's friend calls, and so she says, you have to call your mom. And so I step outside. my mom tells me that my dad had died by suicide, and I just slide down the car at a gold Suburban at the time. And I just remember being overwhelmed. And one of my coping mechanisms personally is relentless positivity. So I felt guilty about this for a long time, is that I said, at least it wasn't my sister, because it was my sister's friend who had called me. And I remember at that time, my dad, like I've shared, used to always say that we don't have control over everything that happens, but we do have control over how we respond to it. So instead of have a great day, we make it a great day. So I made a decision that I wasn't going to let his story of dying by suicide or being overcome with mental illness and depression be what defined him. I wanted to be that redemption story, that his make it a great concept would live on through me, but I didn't know exactly how to do that. And so it became a mantra, but I didn't have an outworking of it. Yeah. And so it just became part of my core values. And I see that in you. And I think that a lot of people, do you see that in other people, that some of the toughest things we go through, that sometimes those can be the catalyst to then take us where we're called to go, or where our purpose is?
Yeah, that's so good, man. Thank you for sharing that too. I'm learning more about you. You know, it's interesting when defining moments happen in our life that aren't exactly the most positive thing. I mean, sometimes, I don't know if you ever think about this, some people could have gone through what you went through and went the opposite. You know, let that be the justification why they're messing up so much and not living to their potential. Yet you chose to take those circumstances and let them empower you to become the man that you are today, to actually honor your dad. And I think about that for me too. And, you know, there was a point in my life too, in my story, like, I just want to say this because it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. At 18 years old, 2 years later, I was living in South Carolina, and I found myself in a jail cell for 16 and a half hours for selling weed. You know, and I remember being in that jail cell, and I just want to be real, just honest right now and vulnerable with the audience. You know, I was chasing that dream, but I still wasn't living in full alignment with that identity that I had chosen to be. And I was sitting in the cot in the jail cell, and I remember like having a visualization of Wally sitting next to me. Hardest conversation of my life, because I felt like I was just dishonoring him. You know, this man spent the remainder of his life pouring into me. Yet a few bad decisions, and I was in that jail cell. And a few more bad decisions, and I could have been even more off course. And I made a choice in that moment that no more. Like, I'm not gonna see, my dad has been in prison my whole life, and people told me I would end up like my dad. Statistically speaking, young men that have an incarcerated father in federal prison, 80% of them end up in jail or prison.
Wow.
So growing up, I had that spoken over me. Then I had this man come into my life who showed me I could be different, that I didn't have to live that way and be that. But yet 2 years later, after he passed away, a couple decisions wrongly made, and I'm back on that path. And I could have continued on that and not be sitting here recording a podcast with you in sunny San Diego, California. I could be living a completely different life. So I decided to make a choice that I was going to align with an identity that I had chosen for myself, that Wally had shown me I could have. So I think it's really important, because we have to make that decision still. You made that decision, Daniel. Like, you're an amazing man, but you chose to become an amazing man. You chose to let those circumstances empower you. I chose to let Wally empower me to be more like him. But I don't think everyone does.
And I love the way you said the defining moment, because in a defining moment, there's the before, there's the after, and in that we have a choice. And even with you, thank you for sharing that it isn't all sunshine and rainbows. And one of the dynamics there, which I actually have a similar story. I don't know if I've actually told this on a podcast before, but I started doing business school. And so I had some friends from inner city Seattle who used to sell drugs and never really thought about it. But then I took an economics class about supply and demand. And so I was like, okay, well, I wanted some money. I'm moving into a house. And so we go out to Washington State, which is the college out there. And I'm like, okay, well, they don't have much supply because it's not Seattle. So I know people who have weed. Why don't I bring some? Yeah. I end up getting a DUI. Some of that's in the car, and I end up in a jail cell as well. And I think at that time that we may think, okay, well, I think there's grace, right? We're learning, we're growing. We're like, okay, I think we're both designed for business, but then there's a right and there's a wrong. And what I learned there is that gray area is not something that I was ever going to be in again. And I think a lot of us have these different experiences in these different times in life where they don't have to, it can be a defining moment, but it doesn't define us, right? So it can say, I learned this at this time, so now I'm not going to be out of integrity or do something where I'm trying to take a shortcut to be able to get to a result. So I want to honor you for making that decision at that time that you were going to do it right and not letting that define you, but it to be a defining moment.
Yeah, so good, man. It's crazy how a few decisions can change our life. And like, I just feel in my heart right now, like the Holy Spirit's telling me that someone listening to this podcast is in that spot. Somebody right there, they've made a few wrong decisions. They're in the gray area. And because of that, there's a shame and guilt where they feel like they can't get on path. And I just want to speak to that individual, to you who's listening to this, who's watching to this. Don't believe that deception from the enemy. Don't let him deceive you. You're only a couple decisions away from getting back into divine alignment for your assignment with our Father.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's one of the dynamics is our past can be a teacher. They don't define us. We can learn from them. What we control is what our present is and then have an eye for the future.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's so powerful there. So Cody, as you are continued in your life, you've really built this courage muscle. You have persevered through so many different dynamics, and now you're helping and giving these gifts to other people. When you're working with thought leaders in different areas and helping them to co-create, what are some of the commonalities you're seeing within these people that are really like a catalyst to take that step to pull that gold out of themselves?
Yeah, great question. Number one, thought leaders that are fully living it out believe in themselves and believe in what they're doing. So I'd say first and foremost, the one common thing I see consistently with leaders that are out there doing it and making the most impact is they've developed a belief system in themselves. So they truly do believe in themselves, who they are and what they're doing. So I'd say that's first and foremost.
Okay. So if let's say that listener that you were talking about, what if maybe my belief isn't where I want it to be?
Yeah.
What are some ways that somebody could build that belief muscle?
It's great. Yeah. I love tactical. Number one, the best way to believe in yourself is to get around people that believe in themselves. Proximity is power, and who you're exposing yourself to is everything. So if you're in a point in your life where you don't believe in yourself, and maybe you're even ashamed of who you are, look to your right, look to your left. Do they share that same belief system? That's what I would change first, is the environment that you're putting yourself in. Now, I didn't have access to high-level guys like you at one point in my life. I wasn't able to sit in a room with you. So I found proximity through this initially. So I cut my friends out, and I started watching the YouTube videos. I started going to the seminars, and that started actually getting me in the rooms, right? I paid to get in the rooms. So I started almost like creating my environment on my own. And it was a little bit of a lonely process in the beginning. But through that, I began to build relational equity with the kinds of people that believed in themselves that I wanted to hang out with, that I wanted to be around. And I do believe that our vibe attracts our tribe. I think right now that listener could shift and say, you know what? Enough's enough. Enough is enough. Today, I'm going to start taking action. Today, I'm going to start developing my mind. Today, I'm going to start being more intentional about who I let speak into my life. And I think 2 years from now, that person could be living a completely different life. But it's going to start with them altering the environment that they're being exposed to, the things that they're putting inside of their mind. You know, I didn't believe in myself for a lot of my life. It took Wally believing in me for me to even somewhat believe in myself back then. But he believed in me so much, Daniel, that like I believed in the belief he had in me, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I think if you get around somebody, like I know you're a friend like that. Like, I see the way you operate and I'm the same way. Sometimes I see people and like, I'm like, I see you. I see the call that God has on your life. And I can tell they don't fully believe it. They don't fully see it. But I continue to affirm that into them. And I think if you're exposed long enough to that, you'll begin to believe in yourself.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I love that you say even what we have on our phones, right? Because they're like, okay, well, my friends aren't running businesses or doing these things or thought leaders in this space. Well, guess what? When I did van life, I just listened to a bunch of podcasts. So you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It was Lewis House, Ed Milet, Steve Weatherford, Matthew McConaughey. It was like all these people, and I'm just listening to their podcasts. And that's what's so beautiful and why I'm such a proponent of podcasts and honored to be able to talk with people like yourself, is because they absolutely transformed my life. Because when I didn't technically have the people or was in those rooms, but as you continue to learn and you're in that environment, then like you said, you raise that vibration, you're able to be that, and then building relational equity. Okay, if you're not able to, be Steve Weatherford's friend, well, if he's coming to do an event, send him a DM and ask if they need help setting up chairs.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of my life, I would find out who I wanted to be around, and I would find a way to serve them. So the most successful guys in my town, I would find out who they are, what they were doing, and I'd go say like, hey, how can I serve you? How can I help you? Can I buy you lunch? Can I buy you breakfast? Whatever it took to get even a few minutes of their time to see how they talked, to see how they communicated, to see how they lived their life, I was there. And so I think that like anyone, especially in America, we're so blessed, man. Like anyone that's making the excuse that they can't surround themselves with great people, it's just an excuse. Like there's so much opportunity here. Like I love what you said about the podcast. Like my mentors, most of them I've never even met. That's what people don't understand. Like right now, them listening to this podcast, they're choosing to let Daniel Hack be their mentor. You're choosing to let me be a mentor to you today. You've never maybe met Daniel. You've never been in a room with him. Doesn't matter. He's still sharing his gold with you. You're still being impacted by that. So I think we get to kind of choose who's speaking into our life.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I remember hearing that where somebody was like, yeah, Darren Hardy is my mentor, but I've never met him. And it's like, okay, well, if you're consuming their content, you're learning from them, you're around that. That's such a powerful dynamic there. So you've given them that. So I'm building up my confidence. I'm building up my belief in myself. So I'm learning in that aspect. And then once I have that belief in myself, what's the next step to I don't know, the one word that's coming to me is like self-actualization of our true and authentic self, so we can be that thought leader. Yeah,
that's great. So once you believe in yourself, by that point you should have discovered what you're good at. There's 3 things, and it's typically what I would say is you need to find the vehicle to channel that belief and those gifts into something so you can give them away to the world. See, a long time ago, Daniel, I thought that if I made a lot of money and I was successful in all these things, that I would be happy. And then I started to get those things and I wasn't happy. And I started to ask God, why am I not happy? Why am I not fulfilled? Well, he said, because you got it wrong. And I was like, what do you mean? And he helped me understand that only through fulfillment will you feel like you're living a full life. And the only way you're going to achieve fulfillment is by being who I created you to be and giving away what I gave you to the world. It's like he designed this beautiful creation of tug and pull. You know what I mean? It's like I have to wake up every day and live out the identity that God's given me and show up and give myself right now to this podcast. I'm receiving. I'm getting fulfillment from talking right now with you. So I think as an individual, when we believe in ourselves, we discover what we're good at. Now we give it away. Maybe you start a business. Maybe you create something. Maybe you solve problems in the world. Through doing that, not only will you create wealth, which is cool, but you'll create fulfillment in your life. So I think it's getting clear on that. And there's 3 things I would look for, because people always ask, well, how do I start a business, right? What can you be the best in the world at? What do you truly believe you can be better than anyone else on this earth at? And yes, have that level of confidence. What are you extremely passionate about? So what do you love? What can you be the best in the world at? And what drives the economic engine? What can make money? So I look at those 3 things. I say, God, what can I be the best in the world at? I honestly believe I can be the best in the world at speaking. I truly do. What am I extremely passionate about? pulling out the God-given gifts, talents, ideas, and passions in other individuals. Check. What can I make money doing? Building a company that allows me to do those two things.
Wow. I love that. It's so tangible. And I will, yes and amen that. Your ability to speak and storytell, and I almost see that where Ed Milet, I think, is one of the best at infusing energy into other people. And
he's good.
And he's amazing at that. And even the way that you speak is so powerful. But I want to also touch on that, like, Cody is Cody. I had this thought in my head where I'm like, I need to bring more energy like Cody does. But I've also know that I have a peaceful presence that makes people feel comfortable. And that,
And you know what's funny? What's going through my mind? I need to be more chill like Daniel.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny how that works? We're always looking at the gifts God gave someone else, comparing it to our own, and like disvaluing our own identity.
Right.
I'm like, man, Daniel's so cool. He's so chill, like his demeanor. I'm too, and then you're like, man, Cody's got energy, this and that. It's amazing. But yet there will never be another you and never another me. And the dynamic of us mixing together right now, that's authentic.
Right. Yeah. And I love that both of us being able to share that is such a perfectly tangible example of what happens in so many rooms. This person has this life and is happy, and then you're looking at all the other things. And comparison is really just like, that's the root of all suffering, or attachment or expectations is the root of all suffering, that it doesn't matter what other people are doing. You can learn from them. And I can say, hey, in certain circumstances, I may want to bring the energy that Cody does, but I know that I'm authentically myself. And so I can utilize that. So I think that's
I just thought of the opposite of comparison. We both have a mutual mentor, is convergence. I just thought of that, and how convergence, though, like we're converging, in our gifts and our talents on this podcast right now versus comparing. There's fruit in that. It's almost like comparison can cancel out the anointing and the gift that God has given us, right. But convergence is aligning.
Right. And that's so interesting, because comparison is, I want to be like that person, but I was designed not to be that person. I was designed to be my own. So it's such an interesting dynamic. And he's talking about Colin Higginbottom, thought leader, just came out with a book called Convergence. And it's
go buy it.
Yeah, go buy it. It's so good. But it also changed the trajectory of my life. I probably think about that word at least a couple times a day.
Wow.
Because it's such a powerful concept of running in the lane that you're supposed to run in, with the people you're supposed to run with, all with the power of God, so that we don't do life alone, which no matter what your faith beliefs are, that we are made by design, which means there is a designer. So if we want to be in alignment with what we were designed to do, and you can't argue that we're all different. That's very, you can see that from an outward perspective. And so that dynamic of convergence is so powerful to take the pressure off, but also to highlight some of the things we talked about. Find your lane.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, you may not know exactly what it is, and that's fine. I think people talk about finding your purpose, right? And it's the, what I've seen is it's the intersection of 3 points: your talents. So what is your God-given ability? Your skills and expertise, which is what you've built, as well as the third is your life story. So for me, going through having a dad who was depressed and that Make It a Great Day and championing mental health, for you, it's being able to see what it was like in one environment to then have Wally and be that person to pull the gold out of other people. And that each of us, we don't have the same experience. We don't have the same talents. We don't have the same, time that we spent doing something like speaking or going on video at 18 years old. So it's okay that we're different, and to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's amazing too, like, if we all would just be our unapologetic, authentic version of ourselves and work on that person, like, the world would be such an amazing place. It's like, there's just so many people out there right now listening to this that are so talented in so many ways that, like, you and I will never possess.
Right.
Like, they're so gifted, yet they're so comparing themselves to maybe even you and I and other people, that they're not cultivating and working on that gift. And I just think about, like, how amazing the world, like, I dream about this. Like, I dream about the day people just really start looking inward instead of outward, and then bringing that to the world.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's our mission, right? We want to help to create the content, to teach the people, to speak the life into it.
Yeah.
And it happened yesterday. That somebody, Carissa, if you're familiar with the EOS system, she's our integrator with gratitude. And she created this beautiful system within Monday.com, which is a CRM. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I could have spent the last 2 years of my life in Monday.com every single day, and I still wouldn't be able to create a system that works with this amazing ability and is this intuitive and logical. And it's because she was gifted and she was made by design with a different set of gifts, and us together as a team make a dynamic duo where I can have vision and she can operationalize that. And so whatever it is that we can be okay being our authentic self.
So good, Daniel.
So that's awesome. So Cody, one of the things I always like to talk about is as we look at our lives, we look at I work to not live with regrets, but I also talk to my younger self, whether it's advice, also get wisdom from my older self. So if you're looking back at your life and you had one piece of advice for your younger self, what would it be?
Yeah, it aligns with our conversation today, and it's actually on my wristband right now. And there will never be another you. You know, really, if I could go back to younger Cody Cottle, it took me a long time to get confident in who I am. And if I could go back to me younger and just sit me down and say, hey, bud, there's never going to be another us. Stop trying to chase being somebody you weren't designed to be. Just be you. I think that if I had done that sooner and I believed in myself sooner and I was confident in myself sooner, that the exponential impact I could have made with my life could be 100x what it is right now.
Right. That's so powerful. There will never be another you. But then also knowing that, yes, you would give that advice, but you're already you're working that out now, and you're telling that to other people.
Yeah.
So now if you're listening to this and you're thinking that I need to be like somebody else, instead adopt what Cody's saying, that there will never be another you, to be authentically yourself, to lean in to what your gifts are.
Yeah.
And then share
this
that
is for
with the
you,
world.
bro. I'm actually going to give you this. I just got a prompting.
Oh,
Daniel, there will never be another you in the world, man. So honored to see the way God's working through your life, man.
Thank you, Cody. We so appreciate your time, your wisdom, the dynamic of what you give to other people. And I want to say, and people have spoken this over me, and it warms my heart every time. But I want to say that Wally is proud of you, that he's looking down at you. He is saying that last couple years of his life were some of the most powerful for him because he was able to leave a legacy. And I can see that he is proud of the legacy that you have helped to give him, but also just where your trajectory, that this is not the end of it, that it's going to continue.
Wow. I received that.
Awesome. So Cody, where can our listeners, where can our viewers follow you? What's the best way to get your content, interact with you, and continue to have you be a mentor for them?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, just launch a podcast as well, The Cody Cottle Show. We'd love for you guys to check it out there. Drop a lot more content on there. Going to get Daniel on there as well. Had to come on his first. He beat me to it.
If you're not first, you're last.
But on social media, I am Cody Cottle. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. It's just Cody Cottle. And then we're about to launch the new site, CodyCottle.com as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cody. You're one of a kind, my friend. Viewers and listeners, remember, you guys have the choice to live life through a lens of gratitude, and make it a great day.